Hey there, it's Tyson Sharp here, and if you're looking to increase sales and profit with authenticity, with transparency and vulnerability, this is the episode for you. Let's dive in. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Awaken Your Business Podcast. It is a pleasure to have Todd Palmer here. We got on a call a few weeks ago, of course, and it's always inspiring to hear how people have grown their businesses and the things they've gone through. And I think if you're building your business, especially going into 2021, it's always not only inspiring but motivating to hear the tools, tactics, strategies of what someone went through in the hard work and hustle, and then obviously to building a big business. And I think with us really growing on social media, with us getting outside and launching new programs, new products for the new year, that pickup of inspiration allows ideas to flow. And so that's why I'd love to have Todd on here to talk all about his experience and everything that he's been able to go through in 25 years of entrepreneurship. Incredible.
Yes.
Incredible.
Yes.
I've hardly been alive that long, but I'd love to give you the floor for a bit and just share with the audience, what is it you're all about, and how did you get to this point where you are right now?
So I was an active CEO for about 25 years. I started my business. It was a recruiting company back in the stone ages of 1997. And that business has served me well as a teaching platform for a lot of highs and lows. I made a ton of mistakes, made a lot of missteps, had some successes. And now with my current business, Extraordinary Advisors, I work with entrepreneurs and solopreneurs and executive leaders to helping them get unstuck, to clear their mindset so that they can get rid of the chaos and crisis around imposter syndrome, around the itty bitty shitty committee in their head that holds them back. As well as, once they get their mind cleared, they have a path and a direction they really think they can go towards and creating that life by design, not just a business by design. Then we put in the practical tools to help them, achieve things that, they never thought possible. I've got a client right now. I just talked to him this afternoon. His revenue in the 2 years of working together has more than doubled. And his profits have grown almost 600% in the 2 years we've worked with him. And he's working about 3.5 days a week. So he's shifted his mind. We've put the tools in place. I keep coaching him to remind him that it's not a sprint, but a journey to where he wants to go. And like a lot of your listeners, he started out as a 1 or 2 man band, and now he's got a staff of more than that. But he's still, we constantly remember where he came from, where he got started, and that was by himself in his basement.
Awesome. A lot of people are in their basements. A lot of people are in their bedrooms. A lot of people are just on their laptop on the couch, just starting something that's of their own and something that is aligned with their heart. And I think that's what I love about this entrepreneurial journey, is that whatever's flowing for us in terms of this contribution that we have to get out to the world, it really just, business is the tool to spread that to the masses, right? And not only to do that, but overcome the obstacles along the way. So let me ask you, in terms of, you mentioned imposter syndrome, why do you think that particular pattern exists? Why do you think it's so common for people to feel like, oh my God, who am I to be doing this? What's been your experience?
I think if you talk to 25 entrepreneurs, you might get 25 different stories, but I think there is a common thread. And the common thread is our inner self-talk, in how we see ourselves and how we see ourselves fitting into the world. And often I think that goes back to how we were raised, our childhood environment, our parents, or whomever our caregivers were, where we were schooled, how we were talked to as students, athletics, etc. I know for me, my imposter syndrome flared up because my business, I started 10 years, I started in 97. By 2006, you'd think after being in business 10 years, I'd have quote unquote figured it out. I hadn't. And I wasn't telling anybody how bad things were in my business. And I wasn't showing up and being vulnerable and authentic. And that business got $600,000 into debt. And I was 2 months away from running out of all of my money. I was going to lose my house. My son and I was a single parent at the time. We were going to be homeless. And I had to deal with my imposter syndrome first and foremost. So I avoided getting help. I avoided telling the truth. I would just show up at parties or show up at, networking events and tell everybody how great things were, because they were telling me how great things were. So if they were great and I didn't want to show up and not be great, and I'm wondering, wow, what has everybody else figured out? I must really be stupid. I really suck. And so that would just perpetuate it. And then I'd go to my office and I'd feel like I had to have all the answers for everyone's problems all the time. And I didn't have all the answers, and I didn't want to tell them I didn't have all the answers because I thought that would make me look like a weak leader. So finally, in September of 2006, I hired a coach, and he helped kind of deconstruct that negative loop in my head around, everybody else has it figured out and I don't. Everybody else in this room or everybody else in this CEO program deserves to be here. And I snuck in, I got lucky, as well as, how to deal with my staff. And he really helped me start working on the doom loop in my head so that my imposter syndrome, while it will always be with me, is no longer driving my business. I just have to sometimes listen to it chirping in the background.
Yeah. Well, what was the decision when you said I wasn't accepting any help? I was in my own lane. What made you sort of reach out and hire a coach at that point?
Because what I was doing when I started the business that helped me get me off the ground, that it was working for me, was no longer working for me. And as I thought back on it, when we start as entrepreneurs or solopreneurs, we have to be rugged individualists a lot of the time. We have to do HR and sales and ops and accounting, and all these different departments fall typically to one person. And from the way I was raised, that served me super well. I grew up in a house where, at the age of 5, I had the terrible tragedy of my father passing away. So my father passes away. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. She went into the workforce, so she left. So my dad was gone. My mom was gone. My mom hired a caregiver, which is fine. My older brother went off to university. My older sister got married and moved across the country. So within 4 months, my 4 primary caregivers were all gone. So what does that tell me? The only person I can rely on, the only consistent in my life, is me. That's great when you're starting a company. The only person I can rely on is me. I can do that. I can sell. I can do ops. I can make sure payroll gets out. I can make sure bills get paid, HR compliance, all those things. Until I wanted to scale, until I wanted to go from a solopreneur, a couple of people, to really build a business. And I had 25, 26 people at one time working for me, and I would be very protective of things, and I wouldn't trust easily, or I wouldn't delegate. I would advocate. So I would just give it to Tyson and say, here, just do it. I wouldn't inspect what I asked you to do. There were no KPIs. There were no measurements. I didn't know enough. So when you let me down, my feelings would be hurt. I'd be upset, which took me back to the pain I felt as a child. So it was a very cyclical situation until finally I kind of snapped out of it. Coach is telling me, you can do things differently. You can handle things differently. Trust the numbers, trust the margins, trust the revenue, trust the KPIs, watch the data, make data-driven decisions, not emotion-based decisions, so that you can keep the business growing and going, and eventually somehow get out of the $600,000 in debt that you're in.
Powerful. And what was the change? And not only what was the change, where did it lead you to, and where are you at now?
Oh gosh. So the change started with inside out leadership. The coach started working on me and how I showed up and how I dealt with my imposter syndrome and how I had to talk through things and how I had to practice gratitude and appreciation, not bitterness and resentment. I wanted to change my exterior business. I had to change my internal workings. Part of that process was to recognize and realize that I had allowed toxicity to live within my company, dysfunction to live within my culture. So the turning point was September 9th, 2006, when I fired my entire company and I started over. And at that point, we put in a model where we worked on the mindset. So my coach and I would talk all the time. What was my mindset? What was working and what wasn't? If something wasn't working, then what we would do is we created an intention around what we did want. So I'm $600,000 in debt, for example. My intention was, I've got to get out of debt. This is not good. My kid and I are going to be homeless. Lots of bells and whistles. There's 600,000 members of my negative committee meeting in my head. So we created an intention, but not an expectation of how to do it. That opened up my creativity. What expectations win lose, where intentionality has a lot of creativity, a lot of room to breathe. I started hiring more new people. So it changed how I hired people. I hired people for their DNA, not for their resume. That they fit my core values. Trained them how to do it. We tried a bunch of different things. So mindset, intention, not expectation. pivoting into strategy around that intention of getting out of debt. I got to hire different people. Now we got to iterate and try a bunch of different things, fail forward, keep what works, get rid of what doesn't, and come back tomorrow and try it again. We used to have this award we call the Fail Forward Award. For the person who failed the most that week, they got the award, not the person who had the most success, because the person who was stumbling around trying new things was the big learner in the office. So there's a lot of those things over the course of time we put in place. Fast forward 10 years later, we paid off all the debt in full. Very proud of that. It was a big rock to climb. And we hockey sticked the business and reached that point with the recruiting space where we found that inflection where there's an increased demand and a diminished supply. In that space, I could charge more and I could get paid faster, which brought down the debt. And we made the Inc. 5000 as one of America's fastest growing companies 6 times. So got out of debt, made the list. Now I work with leaders and coaches and solopreneurs to help them do some of the things that we did back in the day.
Crazy. Awesome. How do you feel now that you're out of debt, you're moving forward? No doubt the fears, doubts, and frustrations of the next level are always coming up. But what is your overall feeling, attitude, mindset towards business now?
You know, it's a great question. So I still use a coach. And what I've learned, especially during these periods of COVID, my main platform to grow my coaching practice was to go speak from stage, to come into association meetings, entrepreneur organization meetings, things like that, to give the speech, tell the stories, and see if my story landed with anybody to get potentially new coaching clients. Well, COVID took away all of my travel, all of my speeches, all of my appearances. And so I made the decision with the help of my current coach, which is a different coach than I used to turn the business around, to decide that for me, this is just for me, but COVID was happening for me, not to me. So because it's happening for me, what can I learn from it? Well, my purpose of being a coach is to improve lives. And that's my why. And I worked with Simon Sinek a dozen years ago. He was very helpful in helping me figure out my 2 words, improve lives. Thought to myself, how can I improve lives from my home? How can I improve lives via technology? How can I improve lives? So I just started volunteering everywhere. So within 67 days, I talked to 42 different CEOs, talking them off the ledge, getting them unstuck around chaos and crisis. A lot of them had not been through some of the things I'd been through. They hadn't tried to turn a company around like I did. They hadn't had to deal with the recession. They hadn't had to deal with things being thrust down upon them from an exterior world like a pandemic versus maybe internally bad decisions like I had to deal with. But the mindset were very similar as woe is me. I'm in big trouble. I'm going to close my doors. I'm never going to survive this. So I did a lot of that. I spoke around the globe from my living room. I spoke in the United States and Canada and Mexico and Australia and over in like Germany, in England, in Malaysia, all of helping entrepreneurs, helping leaders get unstuck around the experiences they were having.
Amazing. Let me ask you, in terms of that shift, what were some of the beliefs that you had to remove and shift in terms of you were in debt, you were worried about going homeless, obviously for your child, but for yourself as well. There would have been some beliefs that were noticed and removed and instilled. What was that like for you? Were there any particular beliefs that stand out when I ask you that?
Oh, for sure. A lot of them were inaccurate. So that's what really resonates with me.
Yeah.
So I thought, for example, my identity as a CEO was tied to my business. If my business was successful, by proxy, I was a success. That's not really true. We make the Inc. 5000 6 times. My friend's like, "Oh my gosh, you've written your ticket. You should be like thrilled over the moon." I'm like, I mean, yeah, it was nice and it's a fun party to go to and it's nice to get the recognition, but it didn't fill the emptiness within. So the second recognition I had during these changes in times was I had a lot of emptiness inside, and that required me to do inner work, not just work on my business. And I found it was really fascinating. The better I worked on my internal issues, the better leader I was. The more I dug deeper, the more authentic, transparent, and vulnerable I became with myself, with my staff, with my peer network, the better leader I became. The business did better. So again, my identity tied to the exterior, not the interior. The interior needed to be worked on to fix the exterior in the business. And I think, another thing that just comes to mind as I'm pondering this was that, it's so much of my thought process was very much that of a competitive athlete. And I just had to win at everything. My definition of success was to create a $20 million company. That was the only definition of success. So it's like playing a sport saying, unless I win the championship of the world, I'm a failure. That's a lot of pressure, and it's not accurate. And I kept chasing 20 million. So I would do bad deals to get the revenue, not the margin. It's insane. What I had to ultimately figure out was redefine what success meant to me. And it moved from being $20 million to a much more holistic model for me. So success is really, and I heard this from Tony Robbins, success is doing what I want, when I want, with whom I want to do it, as often as possible. So in theory, I could define our conversation today as a successful use of my time because I'm enjoying the conversation. I'm enjoying your company. I'm getting energized about it. I'm telling myself that someone will hear this. It may improve their lives. It meets all of my requirements versus what can I sell? What can I buy? Who can I impress? How can I make my next big deal happen? That didn't work for me.
Mm. And most people define success as waking up, as Tony Robbins says all the time. You know, sometimes you have some people that have their success as, I need to have this amount of body fat. I need to have this amount of, money in the bank. I need to, never yell at my kids, all those different things. Or you have the person who wakes up and says, you know what, today's a good day because I wake up, I look at my feet and I see that I'm above ground.
There you go.
And it's a different criteria of success, but one of them allows a resourcefulness, a joy of life, a bit of grace that flows in, right? And when you have that criteria of success, as you say, it takes the pressure off. Although pressure can aid you in some ways, a lot of people, especially entrepreneurs, have this pressure of identity. It's like,
yes,
I'm not this, then I'm useless. If my business isn't successful in the way that my mind thinks it should, then I myself am a failure. And
oh my gosh,
I can't live with that, right?
I deal with that all the time with my clients. I've got a client who's so wrapped up. Like, if I don't make a certain dollar amount, my family's not going to be okay. My wife's not going to love me. If I can't buy her this, or I can't take my kids here. And I'm like, whoa. Let's really break it down a little bit. Has anybody said all those things to you? No. So this is maybe the story you tell yourself. Well, isn't that the only story? No. A lot of the times as a coach, I'm championing an entrepreneur or a solopreneur on their hero's journey. It's not my hero's journey. It's your hero's journey. I'm the guide of your journey. So my job is to help you see things differently, to ask you the probing questions. Ultimately, the journey is yours to take any direction you want to go in. But if you're, think about it, you're going through the mountains and you're going through the woods and you're coming up over a cliff. Well, as the guide of your journey, I see if you take 5 more steps forward, you're going to go over the cliff. How do I know that? Because that's what I did. Now, if you take 5 steps to the left, maybe a little bit harder steps because you're going you're going outside of your straight and narrow, you'll live to fight another day. It may not be as quickly as exciting as you think it might be as you jump off the cliff and hope that you don't crash to the bottom of the rocks. But I'm telling you from experience, that may be a way for you to go differently, but ultimately the choice is yours. And so much of the work I do is so enjoyable because just a lot of massive curiosity questions wrapped around accountability to the decisions the leaders make get them to success levels they never thought they'd reach. And the crazy thing is, most of us become entrepreneurs or solopreneurs because we don't want a boss. The challenge becomes we stink at holding ourselves accountable. That's why they bring in people like me.
Wow. What do you think it is in terms of your coaching experience and what you've seen on the entrepreneurial journey? Why do you think people aren't willing to take that step of being self-accountable? Obviously, they've escaped they've ditched the 9 to 5 and they're starting to do their own things. They don't want a boss. But then when they start their entrepreneurship, they realize, I need to do this thing, I need to do that thing, and I know I need to do this, and I know I need to do that, and they don't. Where do you think that pattern lies into their journey?
So I think a couple of things. One, there's a thought construct that I'm a big fan of. It's called the Law of Avoidance, and it's by an author named Mark Manson. And Manson talks about in his book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Blank, that the law of avoidance comes from when our identity is so tied into something. So he uses a story of a friend of his who wants to open an art gallery. And for years, he's talking about opening an art gallery. And another friend of his, maybe this is even a better one. A friend of his is talking about writing a book. And in the process of writing the book, he's gotten to the point where he's got the outline done and he's started writing it, but he just can't ever get past like the 30th page or the 40th page. And he's been working on this for years. Well, what Manson argues in the Law of Avoidance is it's safer psychologically for this person to talk about doing something, but to actually take that risk to put that, to complete the book, turn it over to an editor, get that, what they would consider critical feedback, because it would shatter their self-image. It's much safer psychologically, and it's crazy to say, well, it would have been a hit, but I was just too busy, or no one would have read it anyways. But no, put the book out there and see what happens. It's that risk. They avoid that. It's that law of avoidance. So I just completed my book. It's going to come out in February of 2021. It took me 5 years to get my book done. I'm on the book that's the people will hopefully read is going to be the 8th version of that book. I've pivoted 8 times throughout the course of the book. And when I finally turned it in, my family said, "Oh my gosh, aren't you excited?" Oh no. Now, like, it's really out there. All of my ideas and my constructs and my teachings and my stories, and the world, I'm now laid vulnerable to the world. And that what we have to become comfortable with that sense, that thought process around failure. The other part that I think people don't grasp and recognize. So one, they practice the law of avoidance. 2, they act like the thought process of failure is a real construct. Failure, if applied and learned correctly, is just you learned something. I tried it, it didn't work. In the 10 steps that I tried, 6 worked, 4 didn't. I'm going to keep the 6 that work, get rid of the other 4, replace them with something new. That's called learning. I mean, all of us at one point were infants and we couldn't walk. It wasn't like we came running out of our mother's womb and we sprinted across the floor to the doctor. We've had to learn over the course of time. And I don't know anybody, in the case of history, maybe one of your listeners will email you saying, "I walked it with my very first step." That's great. Most of us walked and fell, stood up, walked and fell, stood up, walked and fell. Well, that's what we have to do in business. We try something, it doesn't work. My book is filled with these stories of these people who just tried different things. I tried different things, and you had to learn from them. And it's a slow, satisfying, sometimes stressful, sometimes painful journey that will ultimately lead you to being successful. But you have to recognize that failure is a construct. And every step you take on the learning process is another step closer to your success, not just another doom loop of failure.
Yeah. I think the key piece for me, this is huge, about the learning how to walk analogy, is that not only does the baby need to learn how to walk, so they need to obviously fail in order to learn how to succeed, but it's in the falling and getting back up that you build the strength necessary to succeed, to walk. I think that's key, because when you're on the ground and you keep falling and building yourself up with that strength, it's the strength of your muscles through your legs, through your core, your hips, by getting up that you learn how to successfully walk. And I think that's exactly the same with entrepreneurship. It's in the failures where you develop maybe the unique perspective or the mindset or the emotional resourcefulness that it takes to succeed. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. It's tenacity and resiliency. I'm going to just tell you a quick story. In the United States, we have this restaurant chain named Kentucky Fried Chicken, founded by a guy named Colonel Sanders. I don't know if you have that down in your neck of the woods or not. Okay, so Colonel Sanders starts Kentucky Fried Chicken at the age of 63 years old. He wasn't a young guy like you or even a young guy like me. He was like an older guy, and he lost his one restaurant for a lot of different reasons. So most of them were beyond his control. They were government issues versus he was on a main highway. They moved the highway. He had a brick and mortar location. It wasn't going to move to the highway. The government diverted the traffic. He lost all of his drive-by business. So he took his 2 assets, his Social Security check and his chicken recipe, and he started driving around the United States trying to sell franchises of his business. And he started in the central part of the United States, and he started working his way west. He went on so many appointments before he got his first yes. And if you can see me, I have this nice sign I share with people from stage. I always ask people, how many appointments do you think he went on? People say, he went on 20 appointments. He went on 100 appointments. The reality was he went on, according to his journal, 1,009 sales appointments before he got his first yes. And he learned on every one of those appointments. He learned sometimes it wasn't what he did, but two things he took away that really pivoted his mindset because he wasn't going to be stubborn about it. And by the way, he's driving around the country living in his car. I mean, it's not like he's staying at the Four Seasons or even the Motel 6. He's living in his car he was so passionate. He was practicing with this grit, this resiliency, this tenacity. So he goes on his 1,009 appointments. He finally closes it. And he wrote down that I closed it because I was able to make the chicken faster because I went from frying it to pressure cooking it. And I added salt into my recipe. Yeah. And it took him 1,009 appointments to make these pivots. Boom. Within I think it was like within 5 years, he had 600 locations. Imagine, I mean, I have mad respect for a 60-some-year-old guy living in his car, driving around trying to sell. Total respect. I'm not sure I could have gone on 1,009 appointments, but he did. Imagine if he quit at appointment 800, which most people would say, oh my gosh, you're a warrior. You kept going. Just kept going and you kept going. Mm. So that's resiliency. That's tenacity. That's failing forward.
Mm. What do you think gave him that tenacity? What do you think was in his model of the world that allowed him to do that maybe someone might be missing, or maybe someone might be developing right now that they can double down on?
You know, that's a great question. And I don't know. So all I can do is speculate. I think a couple things come to mind though. And there's a thought process in entrepreneurship called burn the bridges. I do this with my recruiting company. I, for a while, worked in my recruiting business, Diversified Industrial Staffing, and I worked in my coaching and consulting and speaking business, Extraordinary Advisors. I was kind of living a double life, you know, a little bit of here, a little bit of there. Well, talking to somebody that I really respect said, you can't have both a wife and a girlfriend. Which do you want? Who are you married to? Who are you committed to? Who are you passionate about? Who do you love? Well, I love my coaching business. I really liked my recruiting business, so I made the tough decision to burn the ships. I walked away from the recruiting business. I sold that off, and I went 100% full-time into the coaching and speaking business, which in my mindset gave me no backup plan. So if I'm Colonel Sanders and I'm driving around, my one restaurant is closed, I have nowhere to go. I'm living in my car. I have no backup plan. I'm living off my Social Security. I'm cashing my checks as I go around the country, and I'm trying to sell the daylights out of this chicken recipe. I don't have another plan. So I think there was that. He had no other plan. He was also single. He was divorced. So he had no one else to keep happy, no one else to take care of. I think that's a factor. And I think the third thing, and again, this is just gut. It's like he believed in it. He had a belief, and he would get enough positive feedback that if I just made a couple of changes, someone might buy it. And he just kept going and going and going and going.
Mm. So I'm assuming people here who want to be successful, first of all, get single. That's the thing I wrote down. No, I think you're spot on in terms of especially the belief. Yeah. You wouldn't go to that many sales calls. You wouldn't go to 1,009, right? You wouldn't even go to 60, right? Without the belief that this can lead to something, the belief that it's just around the corner. And if you go through 1,000, clearly there's the belief, like it only just takes one.
Right.
If he believed it's going to take 100 and he's been on 1,000 and he's had zero yeses, you wouldn't be going on that next one. He would have at some level had that belief. Like it just takes that one hit, that one go, and it's just reiterating and testing with every no that leads to that yes. A lot of people are probably going through trying to get that yes after 5 or 6,
Sure. And I think partially too, I'm going to guess that he also took feedback from his audience. He got feedback from the buyers, and it took too long to cook. Okay, I got to address that. That's a blocker to someone saying yes. I got to find a way to cook it faster. It just doesn't have enough flavor in it. Why don't we? The story is some guy goes, let's bring your recipe in the back and let's add a couple things and see if it gets better. And so that got him on the salt thing. And so, but then he still couldn't cook it fast enough. So he's knocking off the objections to the buy. He's knocking off the objections from the buyer not wanting to purchase what he was selling. Versus the stubborn person.
Yeah.
Who says, no, my way is the only way. My way is the only way. This is the only way to do it. We fry it, no salt. Well, had he kept doing that, who knows if he would have ever gotten to a yes, because at that point the data had told him he got 1,009 no's. So nobody wants to buy your recipe. It's pretty clear. But if you're iterating, you're learning, you're polishing. It's almost like, I think about it, like with my book, I did all these different versions. Now the last version is going to come out. You learn it, you read it, you iterate through it. Whether you look at it from an entrepreneurship perspective or even from an art perspective, you look at a script for a movie. How many rewrites does it go through? You take a look at some classic songs. How many rewrites did they go through? How many different singers did they bring in? All these different things. People had to learn what would work and what wouldn't work. And as entrepreneurs, a lot of times we tell ourselves that everybody else is wrong and I'm right. I know I did that. And we don't take the feedback and absorb it in a way that it creates positivity in regards to change. Our feelings get hurt. We beat ourselves up. We blame others. We blame whomever. If there's nothing to really show that what you're doing is 100% accurate in the eyes of the marketplace, you may need to pivot.
Totally, I agree. And it brings me back to what you said before in terms of if someone's not putting something out there, if they're avoiding doing something, it must be for a reason. It must be some needs are met, or they feel more safe, or they feel more recognition. Because if someone has a book, or someone has a podcast idea, or someone's about to launch a Facebook group, and they're in that avoidance saying, oh, I'm going to do this next year. Oh, I can't wait till I'm going to do this. Like, who they're speaking to probably gives them some sort of recognition. Oh yeah, that's awesome. Good job on thinking of that idea. Good job on going on it. And they get some recognition while remaining safe,
Right. Well, and it's that safety. I think it's so wise that you chose the word safe. I think it's so applicable. We will psychologically stay in a space that is we determine as safe, but it's not always healthy. And I think there's a difference and a gap. I mean, people stay in abusive relationships that they tell themselves, well, it's the devil I know versus the devil I don't know. And people stay because they need the money. People stay because they a family and what have you. The reality is, for a lot of people, the unknown is scary, because what happens when we deal with the unknown, we fill in that gap, and we usually fill in that gap in at the 5% edges. We either fill it in like, I'm going to start this business, I'm going to start this podcast, I'm going to crush it, I'm going to be a millionaire, and I'm going to be in the Forbes 500 or the Inc. 5000 next year. Well, it doesn't work that way. So that's 5%. Or the other 5% is nobody's going to buy it. Nobody's going to listen. Nobody's going to care. My family thinks I'm stupid. My girlfriend thinks I'm stupid. My husband thinks I'm ridiculous. All the naysayers. So we listen to them. When the reality is, if we just take the action, from that first action, we will get motivated. That's how the brain works. So we take the action, we get motivated. The motivation is, tried 10 things, 6 worked, 4 didn't. Okay, now I'm motivated. I'm going to keep the 6, move the 4, and keep doing it. I mean, that's what we did at Diversify to turn around. We tried a bunch of different things until we landed on a recipe that worked. I think anybody can apply that if they're willing to lean into that uncomfortableness versus shy away from it under the false construct of staying safe.
What's the meaning that you give feeling uncomfortable?
Oh my gosh, there's so many different versions of it. I've got clients that have a fear of public speaking. They would not show up on your podcast today because in their mind, that's public speaking. And then when I publicly speak, I could say something stupid, or I could say something ridiculous. People could make fun of me, all those different things. So that's certainly one way to approach it. I think there's so many other ways that we get self-protective, and we don't want to put ourselves out there. And it's that risk of being seen as who we really are. Whereas, and a lot of leaders will tell you this, if we approach something with authenticity, vulnerability, I call it ATV, authenticity, transparency, and vulnerability. If we go into the conversation with our teams, so say you're running a 5-6 person company, for example, small group, and you don't know all the answers, a lot of people will fake it. They'll dodge, they'll duck. No, like, listen, Tyson, John, Jane, Sue, we're all going to get together. Here are the list of issues the company has. What do you all think? Well, Todd, what do you think? Guys, if I had all the answers, I would have already made some decisions. I'd like to hear what everybody else thinks. Leaders speak last. I want to hear what everybody else thinks. Let's talk around the room. Let's whiteboard this thing out, and let's come up with some ways to solve whatever these problems are. And what that does is it creates a psychologically safe work environment. Google's done a lot of research on this. They practice it in their facilities. When employees or teammates or independent contractors or whomever we're interacting with to grow our businesses feel that they're seen and they're heard, they can share their opinions and ideas, and they have a voice in the room, but not necessarily a seat at the table, but a voice in the room, that creates a more of a team atmosphere, more of a safe atmosphere versus, hey, I don't want to say anything because that crazy Todd guy is going to shoot me down. He's going to yell at me. I'm going to feel like an idiot. And I got to go home and tell my kids about my day. And my boss yelled at me because my idea was ridiculous. That's creating that's the exact opposite of what we want to do. Where I'm like working with this company right now, I said, let's put out all your ideas on a board. And what we did is we put like 30 ideas. We took a little bit of idea number 6 and a little bit of idea number 9 and idea number 20, put a little sprinkle of idea number 2 and came up with a brand new process. We took all these pieces and put it together. Had we censored any of those ideas, maybe they wouldn't have come out. That's creating a psychologically safe work environment.
Yeah. And even those who are listening who might not have, a team or someone who, an office they go to where they're going to bring up these sort of things, what resonates clearly is that if you're putting content out there, if you're doing a podcast or you're doing videos or you're doing certain posts, if you're putting yourself out there, you're putting your heart out there, like you say, being authentic, being transparent, especially, and being vulnerable is opening up that space for you to feel free, right? Mm-hmm. There's not that barrier. There's not that, block of saying, I need to know all the answers and everything that I say needs to be coming out and delivered in the perfect amount of words in the perfect way with the perfect structure. And if you give yourself that flexibility and open space to be vulnerable, to be transparent, to be authentically you, then people will feel that, right? People will feel that in your content and as your audience. That would be my question. What was going through your mind when you released this book that's coming out in 6 weeks? If you have, if you have this voice that says, oh my God, all my stories are out there, I'd love to know the thoughts in your head and then also the meaning that you give it and especially why you put it out there.
Sure. So the first thing I do is I'm going to tell the world, hey, this is me being real. This is me being authentic. I mean, I'm putting it, for me, a book is kind of I call it a headstone moment. It's going to live beyond me. And when you name it like I did, I'm calling it, from suck to success, an extraordinary guide to entrepreneurship. And in there, I tell my story and other stories of people who really are real people. They're not just constructs or not, I tell the Colonel Sanders story of the book. Yeah, he's deceased. I got that. But a lot of these people are still alive and they showed up to help me write this book. They showed up for me to help others learn from our stories, because I think people have a really good BS detector. And when they're being sold something or they're being pushed some idea or pushed some construct from somebody who's never been there, done that, in my case, survived it, then it doesn't land as much. Whereas if I say, hey, listen, I don't have all the answers. This is what worked well for me. Take what works for you, get rid of the rest. I think that lands quite well with people. And I find the feedback I've gotten from my coaching clients, I gave them all preview copies of the book, is it really resonates with them and they want to share it with people. And I believe that when people share something, it's not only they want to share the message in the book, but also when I refer something or I hand something over like a book, it's a statement of who I am. And if I believe in the book and I share it with you, Tyson, and you get value out of it, you share it with somebody else, then it kind of creates a groundswell. And that's really my hope for the book, is that, people will find value in it. Mm-hmm. Value is going to be so subjective to them. But ultimately I think, and I believe, and I've experienced that you can create a life by design of work-life integration that allows you to have your own definition of success, whatever that means to you. And I think, a lot of the work you do kind of resonates around that. And it helps people get to that world they want to have without, from my generation, generations previous, to be successful, I'm the first one in, I'm the last one out, and I sacrifice my family and I sacrifice my health and I sacrifice all these things to get a title on the door or to get a 6-figure income or whatever I'm going for. And then when I get it and I look back on all that I sacrificed, I really question why I did it. Mm-hmm. So I'd rather just put all of that out there, have people take a look at it. I mean, there's 8 chapters in the book. 4 of them are just on mindset and how we have to learn to be authentic, how there's our 4-step process, how we deal so much with intention, not expectation. And then we pivot into practical steps and how to apply it to your world. At the end of each chapter, there's little snippets of homework you can do to get yourself unstuck, but maybe holding you back, whether it's professional or personal. And, I invite people who are interested to check it out so that they can hopefully get just like 1 or 2 good ideas. I mean, that's when we speak from stage, they always say, listen, you're up there for an hour, they're gonna remember 2 to 3 things you say.
Yeah. That's crazy. I want to tap into that. You said that there's a 4-step formula, especially for failure forward leadership. Let's dive into that so people can have some tangible takeaways or some steps they might
for sure, love to
into their life.
Yeah. So for me, I call it our E4 process, the letter E, the number 4. And it's kind of like it's the same process I use to get out of debt in the business. So identify from a mindset perspective as a leader, what's not working for you. So for me, being a rugged individualist was not working for me anymore. Chasing just revenue and not margin was not working for me anymore. So I needed to come up with a new idea. So I created an intention around, so the things that weren't working got me into debt. So the debt's the problem I want to solve. And attacking it the old way didn't work. Second step is to take an intentional mindset, not an expectational mindset around that. So I have this debt problem. I need to come up with ways around to get out of that debt, ideally to get paid faster and get paid more to accelerate the debt payment structure and get out of debt quicker. I don't know how to do that yet, but that's my intention. Versus my expectation is the only way I'm going to get out of debt is if I sell X widget for Y price for Z profit. That's the only way. And we're just going to keep driving that, hitting that hammer or hitting that screw with a hammer until we drive it through the wood. And that didn't work for me real well. More creative mindset. So then we created a strategy, the third step, to that intention, which ties to that mindset shift. The strategy was around, we started trying a bunch of different things when we were talking to prospective customers and current clients about what their needs were, how we could help them. And we identified this space below the surface of temporary help and staffing in the manufacturing space in the United States, where there's an increased demand and a diminished supply. And so we would say to our clients and prospects, if I find this unicorn candidate that you can't find on your own, would you take him? Yes, I would. You do, and then we'd say, well, he's going to cost more than the average person. Yeah, we need them. They're like gold. They're rare. We'll pay more for that. Oh, how much more? And we started working on that. Then we decided that our days outstanding were 90 to 120 days. We need to get that down under 30 days. So we pulled back 14 days. Why did we pick 14 days? Because people in the United States get paid either weekly or bi-weekly. So either get paid in 7 days or 14 days. Put my check in the same check run. And what they said is, okay, awesome. So and it just kept working. We just kept doing that over and over. And it took us a couple of years to figure all these little bite-sized pieces out. But if we just got fixated on one thing and we didn't have intention versus expectation, we didn't create a strategy around that intention, and we didn't take massive action around that strategy, we never would have gotten out of debt. So again, just to kind of recap it for everybody, it's identify the mindset that's not working for you and the result that it created. Set an intention, not an expectation of what do you want to see happen. Create a strategy to that intention, create a plan. Then the fourth step is, bring in outside resources, bring in other employees, bring in independent contractors, bring in a coach, iterate, pivot through that, learn from it, repeat, and always go through the loop. And every day, we used to literally have meetings on this, I kid you, every morning at 8:30 in the morning, we would go through the same loop every single day. What did you learn? What didn't work? All right, what's our new goal? How can we? And we just did it every single day for about 3 years.
Wow. People who are listening, who are growing their own businesses online, can see where this will serve them. Because whether it be in your content, in your niche, in your offer, not only does it take some testing and reiterating, but it is always a loop. It's always evolving, where if you were to evolve and reiterate your mindset, that's going to shift the content that you're going to create. And obviously the value that you're giving to the world. If that's meeting a need, then it'll grow. If it's not, and there's no market demand for it, it's not going to grow. And so testing and tweaking and getting feedback from your audience, your customers, your prospects is key. Once you have that formula of what the market wants, testing and reiterating on your actual offer is what some people aren't willing to do. But once you test on your offer, let's say you have a 6-week program and you find out the need, you have people go through your program, you test and tweak. It's like, this is what helped them get this result. This is what didn't. This is what they wanted. This is what they didn't. This is what, helped make, leverage my time. And this is what didn't. And then you just go back around the cycle, right? And you go back around the cycle of testing and tweaking. And that's sort of similar to what you're presenting here of what you did in terms of not only your mindset, but also learning and implementing a strategy and then testing and tweaking along the way. And then at the end, building in resources and things that you can add on to it. So no doubt, it's just the mindset and the intent of consistently putting it out there, reiterating, and really having no attachment to the outcome, just simply observing and reiterating. I call it the serving scientist. It's like being a scientist from a place of service. It's like no expectation, just getting out there, testing and tweaking because I'm here to serve.
Yeah, and, I love that. I love that. Could be the title of your next book.
Maybe.
Serving
Scientist. We will see. This is patent pending. We'll put it in the show notes. But that's great. I love these sort of tips. I love these strategies. I love these mindset adjustments. Is there anything else that you feel intuitively the audience needs to know and can implement in order to grow their business the way they want, in order to do it in a way that's aligned? What's flowing through you at the moment?
Two things. One, anybody who's listening, I would always challenge you to continue to focus on being a lifelong learner. A lot of entrepreneurs get stuck thinking they've figured it all out at certain points for whatever reason. And that's really, I find that to be very much a big falsehood, is that you think you've cracked the code and then you stop working. Well, then as soon as you do that, it's like the wind goes out of your sails. So continually learn, listen to more podcasts, listen to different speakers, buy books, keep feeding your brain, because you just never know where that one good idea is. And I know, one of my favorite entrepreneurs here in the United States is a guy named Mark Cuban. He reads 3 to 4 hours a day looking for that one good idea or that one mindset shift. So if it's good enough for a guy in a Shark Tank, it's probably good enough for most of us. And the second thing I would challenge anybody to do is entrepreneurship can be very lonely, I think, my experience. And an entrepreneur alone is an entrepreneur at risk. Find a tribe, whether it's a mastermind community, whether it's like an EO or a YPO, depending on the size of your organization, whether it's, getting a coach, whether it's getting together with a bunch of like-minded individuals, so that when you're a solopreneur specifically, a lot of your time is spent in the 6 inches between your ears. You're in there having your board meeting with yourself, trying to solve problems in a vacuum. Whereas if you can connect with others, find other people to communicate with, connect with, and share some of your successes. Certainly, let's share our successes, but also some of your challenges, some of your struggles. That community of learners out there, I think, can pay huge dividends. I mean, I just did this last night. So I'm in a community of CEOs, both active and retired. So Christmas is coming up, and we bought our daughter an iPhone. She's 12. I am freaking out. It's more stressful than almost any other business deal I've ever done, because I just think it's, opening up the world to her. So I put a message out to this group I'm part of saying, have any of you ever, I call it an experience share. Any experience shares around giving your kids a phone in a safe, effective, productive, and caring way where they feel empowered and not shamed and guilted, but also realize this is a powerful device for both good and for evil, something like that. I woke up this morning, I had 17 different responses, a bunch of great ideas. Most of them I had never thought about, versus being in my little tiny brain here, in my little channel, looking at it just one way of like, I just don't want, our child to be corrupted. So my point is, not only do I suggest you all do that, I practice what I preach.
Yeah. Was it 17 messages of everyone saying, don't do it?
Because that's honestly a great question, because I put the word experience share. I wasn't looking for an opinion. I only wanted to hear from people who'd actually done it. Now you get the guy, well, I did it this way and it was a nightmare and you shouldn't do it. He does work, the person works their way there, but I didn't want that because we already decided we were going to do that. So how can we do it safely? How can we support her? How can we put the proper guardrails in place And like I said, so tomorrow I got 3 hours booked on my calendar to set up all the gadgets and gizmos and protection pieces, so that when we give it to her in a couple of days, she's able to enjoy it immediately, because she's a kid. She wants instant gratification, just like most entrepreneurs. And I don't want to have to then take it back and then spend Christmas Day putting this thing together. So just the power of the tribe was a really great service to me.
Wow. So she's getting an iPhone. She's got Todd Palmer right by her side. How long is it going to take her to build an online business?
That'll be interesting. So I've got an 11-year-old, a 12-year-old, and I've got a 29-year-old. And my 29-year-old is a CPA. God love him. He's actually strongly looking at different options to either start a side hustle. So he's got a great job, great company, or maybe someday he'll even go into entrepreneurship. And we had a conversation recently. I said, do you remember how bad it was when they were going to take the house and the debt and everything else? And here's what he told me for the parents who struggle, that how much they may suck. He's like, no, I don't remember most. Like, he goes, but I read about it in your book. That sounds awful. I'm just dying.
You're like up at night and worrying. They're just, everything's fine.
You got it. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
No, dude, I'll work on this, man.
Man, that's awesome. I love the perspective. And that's just what we can sort of, we feel within our families and everything like that. Everyone's got different perspectives, but sometimes we play these stories in our head like, oh yeah, this is something that's, going to scar them for life, or it's something that they're going to, regret, or I'm not setting them up for success, whatever it may be. And then later down the track, they're like, oh, I didn't even realize that happened. Wasn't thinking too much about it, and it just really goes to show the stories in our heads can't truly be trusted 100% of the time. Hey?
Oh, that is a great point. We're never as great as we think we are, and we're never as bad as we think we are, as parents or as entrepreneurs.
Yeah, there's always the in between. And but like I said, as long as when the focus is towards service, when the focus is towards contribution, me personally, I don't mind sucking every now and then. I don't mind sucking 95% of the time, but if that 5% leads to an aspect of growth or development that I know I need, and it's with the intention that I'm here to serve and I'm here to give at a deeper level, then that's what I'm willing to do. And I feel the same thing for you, my friend, in terms of your journey, and especially the ups and downs you've been on. You wouldn't be going through that, especially through the identity shifts and everything that, rocks our psyche, if it wasn't because of a human need and a true inspiration to serve and to contribute. So I thank you for the journey you've been on, the inspiration you are, and I'd love to give you the space to share with our audience how they can connect with you if they want to get to know you and your content a bit deeper.
Oh, well, thank you so much. So anybody who's found value in our conversation, and I really think there was a lot of nuggets, and I think that Tyson did a great job of taking it kind of through the conversation. If anybody heard anything that really landed and resonated with them, whether you're a solopreneur, heck, whether you're a parent trying to set up an iPhone, please reach out to me. I can be reached at todd@extraordinaryadvisors.com. My website, extraordinaryadvisors.com. If you forget my name, go in there, the contact us section, and I'm happy to give anybody in the world 30 minutes of my time for free to talk about what's got you stuck, what your doom loop is, what your itty bitty negative committee's telling you to get you unstuck. If you have business issues, I'm happy to work through those with you. I just helped somebody recently deal with their kids living in their shadow, and the son said to the father, he's like, you're a successful entrepreneur, but you're really not a successful dad. It gets very cold in your shadow. When am I going to be as important as your business? So in the coaching that I do, in the Life by Design work that I help people create, I touch on a lot of subjects. So I'm happy to have that confidential conversation with anybody who reaches out. I guess the other thing I'd say too is my book comes out February of 2021. It'll be on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. And the title is From Suck to Success, A Guide to Extraordinary Entrepreneurship. And I'm really excited about the first page of it, because it literally defines what an extraordinary life looks like.
Beautiful. I love it. Is there anything else that you want to share that would make this conversation feel complete for the listeners who have been going through this, the journey of the last hour or so?
I think for me, if you're an entrepreneur, I tip my hat to you. It's not always a happy road, but it can be a satisfying road. And I go back to take a look at, an entrepreneur alone is an entrepreneur at risk. Get the support, help, and the network you need. And, every time you think you want to quit, just think of our 67-year-old friend, Colonel Sanders, driving around in his Studebaker in the 50s and 60s, trying to sell his chicken recipe in the 1,009 appointments he went on. And ask yourself, what are you so passionate about in your life? What are you so passionate about in your business that you would go out and do 1,009 times and be told no? Then you're onto something, because that's really, when we have purpose and passion, we will push through anything.
Whew. I get goosebumps with that question. So like, what are you passionate about that would lead you to want to do that? That would lead you to go through over 1,000 appointments. That's crazy. And people can feel some ideas flow through. Go on a brainstorm and just jot down, what are you passionate about? What are the things that you're inspired by that would lead to you going down the same route that led to the KFC chain, and to, rock and roll with something inspiring of your own. Well, Todd, it's been an absolute pleasure, my friend. I love the tips and tricks that you've given here. A lot of value in this, and definitely people are going to want to reach out and not only reach out on your website, but suss out your book as well in February. No doubt I'll put the links in the show notes so people can easily do that. But man, thanks for being here. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. It was a joy to be here. Thanks for having me on your show. I appreciate you.
No worries.